Hello, everyone. A warm welcome to this energetic webinar on a soulful topic, work happiness and why it matters to talent today, brought to you by ETHRWorld and Indeed. Happiness matters because it makes us better people. It helps us to treat people more kindly, and it makes us the people we ought to be. For organization, the pandemic has highlighted one guiding principle. Employees need to know they can trust their employers to keep their well-being in mind. Workforce well-being and happiness are built on a foundation of policies and practices that encourage and support all individuals in all aspects of their work. This can range from very basics such as fair pay to higher ideals such as inclusion and belonging, flexibility, and maintaining trust and safety. The goal is to generate workplace happiness and a culture of well-being among employees. We have titans from eminent organizations who will share their research and experiences around work happiness and why it matters today. Please join me in welcoming Sejal Haribhakti Modi. She's General Manager, HR, Supply Chain, Finance, Legal, South Asia, Unilever. Chandni Kamal, Global Head, Diversity and Inclusion, Employee Engagement, Wellness, Employee Experience at HCL Technologies. Rohan Sylvester, Recruitment Evangelist, Indeed. I would also take this opportunity to welcome the audience. Viewers, you are very important for this particular session. There is a chat tab on your screen. Please exchange ideas, thoughts, as well as questions for the panel using the chat tab. I will start taking your questions from the middle of the session. So please do not wait till the end to raise your questions. We want to make the session very insightful for you so that you walk away with great takeaways. So please use this opportunity to ask all your questions, probe further on this very thought-provoking topic. Let's start this discussion with the thought, what makes a happy workplace? Given that happiness is very subjective, and what makes one happy can cause other uneasiness. So how do leaders design a happy workplace? I would want all of you to share your perspective on this theme. Let's start with Chandni, and then we'll go to Sejal and Rohan.
Right. Thank you, Pooja. And welcome everyone. That's a good question about, as you started saying happiness, and happiness is very subjective. And what is the organization looking at when you look at an employee's happiness? I may be very happy in what I'm doing or outside, but am I being a productive employee? End of the day, as an organization, we need an engaged and a productive employee. And the happiness, that's why will probably get confined into the tools of saying the employee happiness as how they are, which will help them make a productive and an engaged employee. Now, happiness can again vary from, it has a broad spectrum, right? It will have happiness right from saying, the kind of job that I'm getting to do, am I happy with that? The kind of roles that I have, the kind of development and progress that I'm looking at, am I getting that? And then is about your physical and mental wellness. I think that's becoming even more important at this particular time as the pandemic we've all faced for the last 2 years. And we've understood the importance of both physical and especially the mental wellness. And we started to talk about it, we're doing a lot around those aspects. And the third one that I would want to add is about how the families get involved, because now you're at home, you're working from home, you've been with your family for most of the time. I mean, unlike earlier where 9 to 10 hours you're at work and you see your family and you kind of try and spend quality time, but here the entire time. So I think the new word is not work-life balance, but the work-life integration, right? And that's why the family gets integrated in the entire thing. So you need to see how you're able to extend your benefits, your engagement activities to the families of the employee as well, which will of course take the person's mind off the all the other issues that can come in the family aspect as well, and that will help in the overall happiness of an employee. So once I don't have those pressing tensions of at home, what I need to do, how do I take care of few things, be it right from the daycare. Earlier you could drop your kid to a daycare center and then you have your time that you get your things done. Today, when you don't have that aspect of a daycare, but do you have a nanny care? Are you able to provide that to the employee, that there is a nanny at home? So those are some aspects that we need to kind of keep looking at and see how we are able to create that enabling environment for an employee, thereby making him this entire aspect of a free status, and that's where is equal to an happiness aspect. So I cover probably these three aspects, and there are a lot of initiatives that happen under let's say mental or physical wellness. Are we able to give the health benefits? So usually as an every organization you have insurance policy and where you have an annual health checkup for the family, but as an at HCL what we're doing is also extending it to the family, be it parent-in-laws, spouse, kids, siblings of certain age group. So again, you're carefree about saying, my health is taken care, and we have really nice clinics at our facilities itself, huge campuses, so we can afford to do that aspect as well, right? So these are some things probably, and many more initiatives as we, have a conversation around, we can keep sharing that. But largely these would be three aspects that we kind of wanting to look at, which will help create the happiness at work.
Sejal, your thoughts?
No, thanks so much, Pooja. And Chanti, couldn't agree with you more on a lot of the stuff that you said. And I really do believe that happiness is very subjective. At Unilever, I think for us, workplace happiness is really governed by two major levers. One is, of course, the organizational efforts that you kind of put in as an organization. But the second is also the individual choices that you make feasible for your employees. So from an organizational effort perspective, I think there are a few things that are extremely important. And again, some of these already Chandni has touched upon. I think the first thing is around infrastructure. And when I talk about infrastructure, I think this is now becoming even more important for us to look at, because this is not just about infrastructure in the office, but it's also about infrastructure in the hybrid context of working from home. And how are you making sure that people feel like they have effective infrastructure to feel a part of the organization, regardless of whether they're working from the office or they're working from home. And it is truly created the environment is truly an inclusive environment. I think the second thing is around policies. And this is again something that Chandi, you talked about health policies, talking about policies around childcare and what are some of the services and opportunities we give people in terms of healthcare and in terms of childcare. In addition to this, of course, policies around flexi working, especially important in the context of hybrid. And Unilever has always been an employer that has given flexibility to people in terms of how they work, when they work, where they work, as long as the outcomes are delivered. And then I think the third important and very, very important thing, again, Chandni, you talked about this, it was the whole well-being framework. And I think well-being is more than just about mental well-being. There is physical well-being, there is a feeling of purposefulness that also can drive well-being. And I think all of these three elements really build our well-being framework in Unilever. We've done a lot of work around physical, mental, and purposeful well-being as part of our entire set of services and what we kind of enable our employees to do. This is all part of what we create as part of our Future Fit plan. In addition to that, we also have put together a lot of physical well-being activities. And from a mental well-being perspective, we've actually put together almost 1,000 mental health champions across Unilever for South Asia. And this has really helped us during this time of COVID and during this entire period where it has been so uncertain and difficult for everybody. I think the fourth thing I wanted to say from a organization perspective was around psychological safety. And this is a lot determined by the leaders in the organization. Leadership and how the leaders enable an environment that allows people to feel comfortable enough to speak up, to share, concerns that they might have. Or even more than anything else, the comfort to say that, this is not working for them from a work-life integration perspective, as Chandni indicated. All of this is part of, the leader's role. And one of the things we're doing is that we're doing a lot of line manager coaching to enable them to be able to have the right conversations at the right time with their teams to build that psychological safety. And the second part that I talked about was about individual choices. So what is very interesting is that actually now more than ever, with this entire year and a half, we are finding that many more of our employees are asking for time to do things that they probably thought were not something that they could ask for very easily. And so what we wanted to do was to make this a more flexible kind of opportunity for them, where we've introduced very recently something called UWork and Open to You. UWork is actually our flexi security model of work, where we are enabling people to choose to work as part of the Unilever organization as an employee, but with flexibility, with the security of being a Unilever employee. And then this is only, of course, open for people that have been part of Unilever and have been employees of Unilever for at least 1 year and have had a certain level of performance, etc. And then Open to You is really for the people that we want to bring on board from the outside, but with a flexible model. So these are some of the things that we're doing to drive choices, because I think individual choice is going to really drive the employee-employer contract going forward, especially in the post-pandemic world. So I think these are just some of the things that I wanted to highlight from a workplace happiness perspective, that and some of the things that Unilever is already doing around it.
Rohan, your thoughts?
Thanks. After such comprehensive answers, I don't think I have much left to say, but I just want to add a couple of things though. And the thing is, I'm actually very glad that conversations around workplace happiness are even happening. I think when I started my career, workplace was not a place for happiness, or at least the general perspective was you go, you earn your living, you might find your happiness somewhere else. But I enjoy the fact that we are having this conversation, and it's coming at the right time, right? The post the pandemic, where things just got really, there were talks about people languishing and things like that. And of course, now it's become a necessity. It's not even a perk, right? And while it might be subjective, it is something we know it need. The best part is people know what they want and people know what makes them happy. And even if they're not sure, they know when they are happy. And that's why what Sejal and Chandni were saying about choices is crucial to this. I think it's important that we create an environment that provides people with flexibility. I think, in my opinion, gone are the days where that one-size-fits-all policies, where everybody gets a certain work from home, everybody gets a certain amount of leave or things. So it's when people, because as you can understand, people are in different stages of their careers, different stages of their life. Happiness means different things to different people. Chandni mentioned about, supporting mothers with care at home, but there might be other people where that may not be the priority. Happiness might be taking 2 weeks off in a month or something. So I think the reality that we are living in is one that we have to build an environment where everyone gets to choose what they want, and they get to have that happiness and they get to choose it. A lot of individual choices, as Sejal said, that's coming into play. And for companies that are probably on the fence about it and saying, this seems like a lot of work, there are benefits to the organization by having a happy workforce as well. The happier they are, the output is higher. I mean, and this is there are studies that show they're more creative, they're more productive, they demonstrate greater perseverance, and they are willing to work through more adverse situations when they are happy. And of course, it doesn't end there as well. It's vital to attract and retain talent. Happy people are going to be the best brand ambassadors for any organization you can possibly have. So I think it's up to organizations to build an environment that allows people to thrive and make themselves happier is the best way to think. I don't think you can force happiness on anyone. So you have to build that environment, and there are benefits for organizations to actually go and do that.
Agree. There are lots of benefits that an organization can harness by creating a happy and thriving culture. I just want to discuss this comment which somebody has put, and we always come across this. You don't leave a company, you leave the bosses. So, in this topic about workplace happiness, it's very important to even, kind of, what do you do about those kind of situation where one person finds himself or herself with a toxic work culture? What do you do about that? Anyone would like to, throw some light on it?
I can start, and then Chandni and Rohan can add. I think I couldn't agree more. Very often, people do leave bosses more than the companies. And I think I alluded to some of the things that I think are very important to manage this, right? So one is creating an environment of psychological safety. And this is a lot created in the form of the culture of the organization. Is there an open communication channel, not just between the line manager and the employee, but also for the employee to raise any concerns that they might have around the boss through a formal mechanism or informal mechanism. In the context of a formal mechanism, most organizations, I'm sure, have a business integrity kind of team or a business integrity council, which kind of allows for people to kind of raise this if it becomes very difficult to address through a informal channel. And then I think the second thing which I talked about, right, is really training and coaching your line managers. Because I think without that, you'll never be able to solve for the issue of having line managers that people want to work for, bosses that people want to work for. How do you build the softer skills of your line managers to be able to have career conversations at the right time? How do you make sure that your line managers understand the career aspirations of your people? And I think the third thing is around more structural elements that, kind of keep allowing us to get a pulse of what is, the pulse on the managers and the organization itself. One way to do this is through, of course, pulse surveys or, engagement surveys, where a very big part of it is about the line manager and the line leadership itself, and get a sense of what is working and not working, and getting that feedback on a more regular basis so that we can kind of take action basis the feedback that we get. So these were just the top 3 things that come to my mind immediately. But happy to hear, Chandni and Rohan as well.
Can I just add on exactly, I would have also picked these 3 pointers this way. But so from a manager, when you're saying training a manager, so there are different levels of training, right? So when you will have a first-time manager, you kind of build, because the first-time managers are very different aspect versus when you're building a leadership level kind of a thing. So different trainings for different set of people. The other one which Sejal picked was on the pulse surveys, right? Or the engagement service of an organization. So when you do these surveys, so sometimes it's not only about a person as an individual, but it's also about the processes. Are the process set? So today, assuming I move from one team to another, did my earlier boss give me handover, and did he sign off on my KRAs and has all that done? And when I move to the new team, has my new manager set my goals? Has he introduced me to the team? Has he, so all of those aspects are probably, it helps a manager to also create I mean, a manager is end of the day a person, right? And we're all busy doing our jobs. And being a manager, a people manager is an additional job to our regular jobs as well, sometimes in some cases. So you need to build those systems and processes in place, which will help a manager to do the right thing, rather than, assuming that, hey, you know what, because now you're a manager, we have trained you, now you should be able to do things on your own. I think giving them those enablement, those tools will help them. So I know the moment I have a new person in my team, I need to do A, B, C, D, and I just do that. It becomes so much more easier. So that's building of process. And then when we get those feedbacks, so that to engagement service, and then you have the 360. 360 will help me understand me as an individual manager, or as an individual what I am, and comparing myself with, of course, the other managers in the same level, and so on and so forth. In a pulse survey, it is more to understand what the organization processes and systems are. Managers are the ones who will help you understand the processes and the system and the organization. So as a team, when I look at the organization, I look through my manager. Usually that's how it works, right? So the manager needs to understand, or we need to ensure that we giving that comfort to the manager, saying, hey, you know what, when you give this engagement scores, these are not your scores. These are scores which the employees feel, your team members feel about the organization. And now you're responsible to ensure that they feel the right way. And that is where those action plans that you need to create, that they feel is the right thing to do. Right. So that's from the managerial aspect. The third thing that I wanted to pick was on a subset of a training is about the inclusion training, right? Because as a manager, I think it's important. I think at every different level, being inclusive is one of the most important thing. And that's why it's called DNI, right? The diversity is never as an individual standalone. It's always DNI.
So,
and now
Chandni, we have a section on inclusivity, further in today's session. So we'll just rest it for that, and we'll just kind of go on with our flow now. All three of you, in fact, spoke about, choices. And, it is the choices that is actually the path towards happiness for any employee. So my next question is to you only, Chandni, and I want to ask you is, how can you motivate employees to take the ownership of keeping themselves happy in the workplace? Because end of the day, my happiness is my prerogative. It is me who decides what makes me happy. So, there should be a culture, there should be an attitude in the organization, that also from the top management to the bottom line, that how do you find and own your happiness and work? So from organization's point of view, how do you create a foundation with respect to, let's say, autonomy or flexibility? Sejal did, bring about a lot of things that they've been doing in Unilever in this matter to help employees own their happiness.
Right. So what we say at the organization is your career is in your hands, right? All the others are your enablers. They can only support you in doing things, but end of the day, it is up to you what you need to pick up. So what we're trying to do is we have all the possible enablements which are there. You have the access to everything. It is up to you to pick them up. So let's say right from building your career, right? Now there are so many trainings which are there. Now it's for you to identify these, and you have trainers, you have your managers, you have all everyone in the system, like your HR, your managers, who can guide you, saying, hey, you know what, this is your role. And there are systems in the place which are already there, like, these are the roles that you're working for. This particular role, these are the competencies that you should have. And for these competencies, these are the trainings that you are available to you. We've guided you there. Now it's up to you to get there and take this up. Of course, from a system, from an organizational level, we do go and get nominations. We do enroll people into different programs which are there. But as an individual employee as well, I have that option of picking up these. And the nominations are not necessarily that comes from a manager. The manager also give nominations, but all our initiatives have a self-nomination as well. Apart from your manager, if you think you want to be a part of it, you can nominate self-nomination as well. So that's from a training aspect, that you have everything in your space. The other thing is, let's say, the software aspect, right? So we say giving you another reason to come to work, which is the engagement and the fun aspect as well, right? So there are so many initiatives that run. And now if I'm a singer or a dancer, I have a platform for that. If I'm a language specialist, I have something for you. Name it, and we have different passion clubs that run. The passion clubs are something that are not run by the organization. organization. It's only a platform given by the organization, but it's the employee resource group run by the people, by the employees, for the employees, and they all organize themselves, right? So you have all the fun aspect and the engagement that you can run on your own. Then you have, from a wellness aspect, we have again a plethora of initiatives, like say you want to be a Zumba, you want to be a part of Zumba, yoga, meditation, Pilates. I mean, you name it. I don't know many of it, but I've just learned now saying we have been giving all of this. Whatever you relate to, you can be a part of it. So what we are trying to say is there are places where you can see everything which is available to you as an employee. Now it's up to you to go pick and choose. We will keep pushing the communication to you. We'll keep telling you all these are available. Wherever we think it is compulsory or necessary, we will of course push you into those communications. But otherwise, everything is in place, and you pick it up, right? Exactly as we were talking about, every individual has their own choices, and we want to give options that you can select from. And
one follow-up
then,
question, Chandni, one follow-up question. Actually, it comes from one of the audience question. You know, you've spoken about a lot of things that you're doing. But what about in PSUs? In public sector units, you know, there is still a lot of bureaucracy, and you have to only go to your manager. You cannot kind of escalate. There are not so many tools available. So what would your advice be to somebody who's in the PSU sector and is having some kind of, challenge with respect to, workplace happiness, or is unhappy? Let's put it like that. What would be one advice to that employee?
So exactly as probably Rohan picked it up and you were saying, so happiness is in your own hands, right? You have to figure out what works for you best. Not every organization will have everything in place. A larger organization probably has the benefit of having everything. A smaller organization may not have. Similarly, like a PSU is very structured and pretty old. I mean, there are a lot of new things that are happening which are not there in PSUs. So I think it's for you to find out. I mean, there can be a lot of things. If you're asking an advice for an individual employee, that will be slightly different versus if you say from their administration teams, that would be different. Now, if you're talking from an employee aspect, it is for you to understand who is that person who will be able to get you through. You still have I'm not sure, but a personal officer over there. You can connect with them. You need to see how your manager gels, or what every manager has a style. You need to identify the style of a manager and change yourself to work with your manager well. Issues, of course, you have your administration team, and I don't know if I'm not too sure of a PSU from that aspect, whether you have a skip level manager where you can really connect with. But I think it is for you to identify which space works the best for you, and then get there. But I think everything else is in your own space, in your own hand to a large extent. Of course, there are structures that you need to work within. But if you can identify, I think that is some time and effort consuming. But once it's done, I think then it will become easier.
Thank you, Chandni, for taking that. It is a difficult question, and thanks for making that attempt. A happy employee is an engaged employee, but not necessarily an engaged employee is a happy employee. Sejal, what I would want you to share a particular used case study, or any one of the challenges that you've seen in employee well-being and how you've solved that in your organization.
So I think, in Unilever, we do definitely understand how important it is to enable the right mental health and well-being for each of us. And, I know your question was more around saying engagement and happiness are not the same things. Happiness could be driving engagement, and sometimes engagement can help to drive happiness. So I think they are interlinked in some form, but they are not the same. And I think, particularly important for us to look at it in the context of this last 1.5 years, to just give you an example. I think what has happened in this last 1.5 years is that the way that people are thinking about their own lives has changed quite drastically. In fact, a lot of people are starting to take action around even their careers and saying, I'm not sure that a 9 to 9 kind of job is for me. I think I want to take some risks, for example, and I want to do something totally different from what I'm doing today. There's so many people that are choosing that to join startups where there isn't necessarily the same level of security that a large organization might give. But a lot of people are choosing that because it makes them happy. And I think that is where it's important for us to see what is it that makes different employees in our organization happy, because everybody's personal and professional situations are very, very different. It's like, when you say that we might be all sailing in the sailing in the same waters, but not in the same boats. So, it's really about understanding what is necessary for us to do for not individuals, because it's impossible for us to look at every single employee. But if we were to almost create segments of our employee and understand, even if we look at them from the context of the generations that we have in our organization, different generations will need different things to be engaged and different things to be happy. So what are some of the things that we can do from a mental health and well-being perspective? And we are really building those holistic well-being programs, which I think have really helped to build that happiness factor. Because even if people may be engaged in their jobs and are excited about their jobs, they may not be, as happy because they aren't necessarily getting the kind of physical, mental, emotional, and purposeful well-being that they need for them to stay happy. So I think really important for us to, like I said, I think just to summarize, look at creating almost segments of employees, understanding what is needed for each segment of segment or type of employees, which could be either through generation or could be through function or team that they're part of. And then the second thing that we can definitely do is to look at looking at elements of both engagement and happiness, because I think they play into each other. And then the last thing, like I said, because these two don't necessarily directly mean the same thing, it's important for us to be able to explain to employees themselves that, very often they tend to think work-life balance is equal to well-being, but it's not. It's the same thing, right? Engagement and happiness are not the same thing. So it's important for people to understand these, because a lot of this is about education. A lot of this is about helping employees understand what they need, and then for them to be able to have an open culture where they can bring it to us and say, this is what I really need to be able to stay engaged and to remain happy and be part of this organization. So I think these are some of the few things that I think are very important, particularly in the context of the post-pandemic world.
Very true, Sejal. Today, inclusion has become a very, very important factor in creating a well-being, focusing on well-being and creating a happy workplace. So there is a lot of, study, there is a lot of work that's happening there, and people are now uncovering different aspects of, diversity and inclusion, which was probably not so open and not so known in the business world. For example, hey guys may have become second nature, but it can be exclusionary. A better practice is a gender neutral option, such as hello everyone or hey everyone, hey team. Rohan, my next question is for you. How can inclusion efforts increase the overall well-being of employees?
Thanks for that question, Pooja. So as companies are working towards building these diverse group companies and hiring diverse candidates, they need to start thinking about how to also build connections between these diverse groups of employees if they want to retain them. The thing about diversity is there is a lot of different types of people, and we have to find ways to bring them together, and inclusion and belonging are key cornerstones of workplace happiness. And it comes down to almost a fundamental level, right? Wellness is about inclusion. If you can't exclude someone and expect them to be happy, for example, and when you have for instance, inclusion is about having policies, benefits that support all employees and not just the majority, right? So inclusion, overall well-being, all go hand in hand. By trying to build an inclusive environment, we will build an environment where everyone has choice, everyone has the flexibility they need to choose what their path, and it creates a system that is good, and it makes people happier. It's essentially boils down to creating an environment that allows employees to participate, speak up, be heard, recognize. And as Sejal said, it's about psychological safety, mental, physical well-being, to be their authentic selves at work rather than fit into a prevailing culture. It's very interesting. There are very preconceived notions about how you should behave at work, right? And we've always lived by these preconceived notions. We've gone to work, we've lived by them. Maybe that's not who we are as people, right? Maybe outside the office, we are not as serious. But at no point did anyone say you can't be funny at office. So it's about creating an environment that lets people be comfortable enough to be who they are in reality, not a different version of themselves, where they are one thing at home and there's another thing at office. And particularly in these times where home and office are pretty much the same thing at this point. So can you imagine it's not even like having the commute to change over, it's switching on the camera or switching off the camera and you're a different person. And it can be tough and difficult. So it's about creating a non-judgmental environment, freedom to express themselves and be authentic and allow and make sure that everyone is accepting of everyone, right? And that is how, and when you think about all these terms, these help with inclusion. And at the same time, if we can practice this, we will have people with better well-being, right? Employees who have better well-being.
Taking a cue from what Rohan said, that the home and office is the same thing now. All you do is, tab a button and, you are in office, and switch it off and you're at home. So there is an audience question specifically for you, Sejal, where somebody wants you to throw light on what does mental well-being mean in this current work from home situation. This question is by Mahesh Jha.
So Mahesh, thanks for this question. And I can tell you that it's a very, very good question and a very relevant question today. And, Pooja, what you said is so true. We've kind of lost the boundary between work and home, thanks to this pandemic. 2-3 things that are coming to my mind, right? So one is, to answer Mahesh's question quite directly, well-being of employees around the world, not just our organization or any organization in India particularly, has definitely been impacted because of the pandemic. So which is exactly why not just HUL but many organizations around the world are starting to talk about well-being so much more. The second thing is mental health, which used to be a taboo topic for so long, is now starting to become mainstream. A lot of people are starting to be comfortable to speak about mental health. As an organization, also something that we always did, but we've kind of dialed it up even more, where we are definitely enabling more conversations around mental health. We have a EAP, or an employee assistant program, and a helpline that helps people to reach out should they need any help. Our HR business partner teams are very much in tune with our people, even though this has been remote. And of course, it's not the same as being able to do this, in person in the office, but doing what we can to stay connected. When I got into this role, I made a conscious effort, for example, to meet almost every single person in the entire supply chain organization, which is a very large organization, even though it was remote, just so that they had a face to the name, because it was all remote. So I think that really makes a big difference. And I think the last thing that I wanted to say around, mental health and mental well-being itself, and what we can do to really, drive this is, I think, related to part of what your previous question was also, Pooja, around, how can inclusion drive well-being, right? Now, inclusion has many elements to it. Inclusion could mean something related to gender. It could mean something related to the kind of workforce that you are building out. But inclusion could also mean, in the context of the post-pandemic world, really allowing for very limited or no difference in a person who works from home and a person who works from the office. Because now we are moving a lot to hybrid. In fact, HUL, we are seeing a lot, many more people starting to come into office. And from December, we are going to encourage more people to start coming more days a week. So, as the hybrid nature of working increases, inclusion as a topic will become very important. And how do we ensure that there is a sense of belongingness that continues to stay, regardless of whether you work in the home or the office? That truly will drive well-being as well. So I think
one follow-up question here, Sejal. Is this also going to be a new divide between, let's say, white-collar and blue-collared employee? I mean, has the pandemic created that kind of additional divide? Because the blue-collared were working on the premises, whereas the white-collared could be safer and working from, the safety of their homes. So how do we ensure that, there is more inclusivity with respect to where and how you're actually working?
I'll give you some real examples of what we did. Okay, so yes, honestly, there was always that sense of feeling that our factory workers are on site in the factories, continue to work through a very tough time, while our white collar or our office going workers, let me put it that way, because we had white collar workers in the factories also being in the factories. So I don't want to divide it between white collar and blue collar, but more factory and office-based workers. So one of the things that we did, right, was to actually almost on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis, we had virtual factory visits where the entire leadership team for supply chain actually participated in these virtual factory visits. It was absolutely amazing because we actually had a visit of the plant sitting in our offices, and they felt at least somewhat connected to us sitting in the offices, because we put this as part of the a plan to stay connected with them. See, because what happens in this hybrid world is that what used to be something that was more informal and okay, I'm just coming, to let's say one of our factories in, let's say, Amli, and saying I'm going to Silvassa today, and it can be a day trip, and you could do that. But here now, everything is intentional. It has to be intentional communication. So that is going to be very critical for us in this post-pandemic world. So this is just one example, but it is definitely upon us to ensure that there isn't a greater divide created between office and factory workers.
Very true. Chandni, going to you, what is your inclusion strategy in HCL? What are some of the roadblocks you face, again, in these new formats of work, and how are you mitigating them to nurture an equitable and content workplace?
I mean, now probably as you're asking, I kind of realize the questions are very different, right? Unlike earlier, okay, what do you do about it? But now it's like, what did you do earlier? And now in the pandemic time, it's just a virtual world and probably the, flexi working kind of a thing. Things look different, which is right. Inclusion, of course, is very important for us because D&I as an agenda has picked up really well. We especially like a company like HCL, where we are present in 55 countries, 150 plus nationalities. Again, be it any kind of a diversity that we look at, from culture to generation to LGBTQ, PWT. So it's important that we are able to create a safe work and enabling work environment for everyone. So with diversity is more of metrics, numbers, you've hired so many women, you've hired so many, and you have those numbers. Inclusion is something which is not quantitative. It's more qualitative, wherein you'll have to understand how you're working on it. So once we were focusing on diversity, the next focus came off was an inclusion. And inclusion, what we did was we tried to see the basis of inclusion is if you're not actively including, you're accidentally excluding someone. So it is about building those behaviors in every individual that you are actively thinking that inclusion is important. Because I think most of us, including you and me, will always say that, hey, you know what, I don't have any biases. But it's not about biases. These are unconscious biases which are there. And that's where they say there's a science behind the entire bit. So we wanted to use those science and then look at how we take this up. We've curated an entire module called something like an inclusion lab, wherein we have different modules for different target audience and a different way of training them, right? So you have right from sponsors to practitioners to champions to influencers, and every set of people at probably it all flows top down, of course. And then you have for different set of people, different kinds. You may have an instructor-led training program, you may have video-led, you may have, you know, assignments or assessments, and you may have activities that you kind of do so that you are able to understand that inclusion is an aspect and you need to actively bring that in your behavior. So we have given different tools for everyone, saying, you know, these are some tools that you can use that makes it easier for you and for you to understand and to practice this on your day-to-day basis. So that's from an inclusion lab aspect. Now, because this is a little bit more intense, because there are like training modules that happen, and you need to, you know, spend some time, probably an hour a week or more in certain cases, and it goes on for like 6 months, so that you are able to, you know, take that up. What we wanted to do is also ensure that a large organization like ours, everyone should be able to have access to it, because it's not like a training that scheduled training and I'm just a part of training. If I miss that training, I kind of miss that. Or, you know, so we wanted to create something which is there for each and everyone. And that's why we created small video nuggets. These are micro learning video nuggets, which are like, you know, we're so used to seeing our WhatsApp videos, right? Those small animated videos, and it kind of catches our attention, and it's easier to see. One, you don't have to sit for an hour for a training program. You just 5 minutes, it's there on your mobile, or it's of course we have mobile enabled app as well on iOS systems. So you just go through them, and those are small videos, 5 minutes. It doesn't take time, and in between your, you know, break time or in between two meetings, you kind of go through them, and those have those relevant pointers. You just pick that, and I think the kind of feedback that we've got is really great, that people have understood what we are wanting to tell them. And now here again, it's very targeted. We have right from context setting to be it of what inclusion is all about, or as a people manager, because you need to have a different way of working. So you have a people manager. Then of course, very important is our hiring managers or our recruiters, because they are the first level of you know, bringing in the diversity into the organization. If you have some biases, it's not going to work, right? So for them, and then LGBTQ is a very sensitive aspect, right? And because we are across the globe, there are certain countries where it's still not legal, where in other countries there are different levels of, you know, acceptances. So keeping that sensitivity in mind, we have modules for them. So there are different modules that have got created, and it's at your fingertip. You can just, you know, once in a while you're going and you just pick that up and you see it. Then it's about talking about inclusion, right? I think that's more important. Once you talk and you have leaders talk about it, you have your sessions where your managers or your town halls that are happening, and you have those aspects that are being discussed. I think that itself is a big incorporation, and things will really change. And of course, this is a change management. It does not happen in a day. Today I'm not inclusive, and tomorrow I'm not going to become inclusive, right? So it's a process by itself. And I think what we're trying to do is to build the paths where you will be able to reach your destination. And I think it's more of, it's not a destination, it's a journey.
Journey. And I agree that, you know, conversations are very important, and somewhere, you know, we need that reiteration. You know, you got to keep, you know, being conscious about it, and, you know, keep reading about it, and, you know, letting the same thought percolate. So that makes it like a, you know, it'll kind of change the trend then. Rohan, this entire thing is about developing a thriving workplace culture. You know, when you talk about well-being and you talk about extended benefit to families, having, you know, a lot of enabling tools. So how does that help to attract the best talent? How do you connect, you know, that to the recruitment, which is again such an important aspect of an organizational success and survival?
Thanks, Pooja. So I think I was saying this earlier as well. Happy employees are the best possible brand ambassadors you can ask for. Like, you can spend money and promote your company on social media, or you can have happy employees. They're cheaper, and it's easy for them to convince people that is important. so the thing to remember that employer brand isn't just that story you tell to attract new talent, right? It's basically giving someone a sneak peek or insights into your employee experience. And you have to, the best way to do this, how do you build an employer brand narrative, is by asking the question to yourself within the organization, answering the question, how is your workforce really doing? Because this helps inform company story and culture. And that is what matters to different employees and job seekers. And what I mean by how is your workforce really doing, and I think I should put the quotes on the really, because the moment you go and brand yourself as a happy place to work and the organization is not happy, or the people who are working there are not happy, that's not going to last long. So by understanding how, by doing pulse checks, by getting feedback for interview, you can bring the reality and the authenticity. If you're really a happy workplace, you will be able to attract talent. And periodically updating your employer brand, and you need to keep doing this constantly, because as things get better or as things change, things become different, right? What was true 2 years ago is not true anymore. And when you do that in your pulse survey, you have to update that in your brand as well. The new reality of hybrid work, or maybe there are new environmental social goals, or there are new employee stories. So keep all of that, your social media accounts, your website, your company pages on Glassdoor or Indeed, and keep them all updated with the latest authentic story of your organization. And that is where it comes through, right? That you give the latest authentic insight into your organization's culture. And if you can communicate this with honesty, with sincerity, you shouldn't have any problems. You should be able to attract all the talent that is necessary. And many times I've seen brands promote themselves about why they're great to work for, without considering the fact that maybe job seekers want to know something else. Talk about benefits and policies, right, that matter to your employees. All of these things that are important to them should also be highlighted. Culture is a big part of that.
Very true, Rohan. Very nicely put. I want to just share a quote by Dr. Jan Emmanuel Denis from University of Oxford. He says, beyond financial metrics, companies should also look at employee well-being metrics. After all, we treasure what we measure. And we've got a lot of audience questions also related to, so how do you measure job satisfaction, organizational commitment, and effective well-being at the workplace? Sejal?
No, I couldn't agree with you more, Pooja, on the fact that it's very important for us to be able to measure what we treasure. And I think definitely our employees are our treasure, as the quote that you indicated. I think a few things that we do, and I'd like to kind of highlight a few of them at least. One of them is that, as I mentioned, we have an engagement survey that does measure with very clear numbers on various elements of engagement, various elements of leadership. It also talks about, what is the likelihood of our employees staying in the organization? Would they recommend the organization to others? So we have, close to 80 different measures in what we call our UniVoice. And we do this UniVoice survey once a year, but we also do a UniPulse, which is usually every quarter that we have a UniPulse. So this is one way that we measure the satisfaction, engagement, the sentiment of the organization. I think the second thing that we do to measure, right, is of course through external ways that we can kind of see how we stack up against other organizations as well. And actually, one of the things that we've moved towards is to also get measured in digital surveys that are, conducted by, for example, Dare to Compete, in partnership with CRISIL. We have Inside IIM. So we look at all of those and see how do we rank as a employer of choice across industries. And HUL has been identified as the employer of choice, as number one employer of choice in these last few years, and especially this year in 2021, we were number one in both of these indicators for students across B schools. So I think that's the second thing from an external perspective. And I think the third thing that we've started to do a lot more of is from a social media strategy and presence perspective. We've started to look at, what are we hearing from our prospective candidates or prospective employees, as well as from employees themselves, and really looking at what do we really need to do to drive a more connected, more connections between not just our employees, but future employees as well. And we've done a lot of live leader sessions as part of our Learn to Lead series. In supply chain, we've also started something called the SC Ed Talks. So a lot of engagement with future employees as well. And I think the fourth thing that we are definitely doing is, really dialed up on the entire digital piece. So for example, our entire UFLP program in this last year was largely fully, in 2020 was fully remote. And in 2021 was largely remote. And we did all of these stints we reworked them from a future skills perspective. And we had them work across international, they got some international exposure, and they also work virtually with our Unilever teams across the world. So I think these are some of the things that we're doing to build those connections and really measuring both internally and externally to make sure that we have a sense and a pulse on what do our employees think and what do our future employees also think. So I think these are some of the things that we've done.
It's a real privilege to have somebody from the group of the best employer to come and share these insights with us. So, thank you, Sejal, for that, really. Chandni, I want you to throw some light on this, but there is one audience question which I must take. Somebody's asking you specifically, what are some of these newly found anchors for happiness which employees can, use? So maybe you can share any one or two anchors for happiness.
Right. I guess this makes it easier to share one or two, because otherwise there are a lot that you can kind of work with different aspects. So I'll pick one aspect about the engagement. I think because otherwise work is something that we have to do, and be it your trainings and development and all of that kind of goes in. So I will always take the alternate path of another happiness, which is part of engagement, right? So I think what we figured is, I'll give you an example saying when we did yoga and Zumba and all that earlier, but now, and there was good participation. We were happy with the participation, right? Now, when it became virtual, and I guess because we're all confined to our home to a large extent, no gym and all of these kind of things, and somewhere the meditation and all of that will help us. We've seen the participation drastically increase to multi-folds, right? And we've got people come back and say, hey, what, these times were very difficult for me, but because I think these meditation sessions that you did or the yoga sessions, I'm at peace and I'm at calm and I can do a lot more work. I mean, unlike other people, other colleagues of mine, other friends who say, hey, it's a very difficult time, it's finding it difficult to work, I'm finding it so much more easier. Right. So I think it's only about picking exactly as I was saying earlier as well, you need to have different aspects which are there in every individual to pick something. So there were people who kind of picked this, and there were a lot of women employees. I wouldn't say I would not restrict to women employees, but even male employees, where they said you're doing a lot of sessions for kids. And I think that made it so much more easier for them as well, saying, what, we had very limited things for our kids to do. And where you have so many sessions, which is learning from right from be it language to cooking to puppetry, and I mean, name it, and we kind of had those. So we could engage the kids as well in that. So that picked up very well as well in this aspect. So I would say more from an engagement aspect is where I kind of feel that there was more that people could relate, and the wellness for sure, and be it mental wellness also. We have life coaches, we have individual sessions, but we also did large forum sessions for doctors, be it right now as this particular month going on with breast cancer awareness, or we had like from weight management to so doctor sessions, life coach sessions, and all of those have picked up really well, and people have started becoming more conscious on those aspects.
Sure. Rohan, just one point from you on measuring well-being and happiness in the workplace.
I think Sejal covered quite a few of those things, and a lot of things make. She was completely on the right on the ball on that one. But yes, as she was also mentioning, getting that external perspective from outside is also important. Apart from these internal pulse surveys, one big thing that we can do is actually look at all those reviews and ratings that current and former employees are leaving. They're going there on websites like Glassdoor, on Indeed, and they're leaving these, I want to say, authentic insights. Of course, it's a perception thing also. This is their perception of what it's like to work there. It may not be the entire reality, but it also informs you, right? Like if someone says, I didn't get a chance to get promoted, now it makes you think maybe we should have done more to make sure they know what they need to do to get promoted. So even if it's not right that there are options to get promoted, have we done a good enough job of letting people know about it? So while these reviews and ratings you need to take with a bit of pinch of salt, you still can glean information that you can use. And this leads to the happiness, right? Pulse surveys, understanding what people are saying. Just by looking at trends and seeing how things are moving, you can actually pinpoint certain policies that have made people happier in certain areas of the country and certain offices, and then replicate it across the world if you have to. So there are a lot of things. And of course, you can also compare yourself with your competition, see how they are doing. Where are we doing not so well as they are doing it, and where are we better? And all of those things are some of the ways you can measure it from a much more objective measure point, which is outside of the system, so to speak.
We could go on for longer, but we are conscious of the time. So I think we come to an end of the session. I hope everyone found the session insightful. I would like to conclude by saying we spend on an average about 70,000 hours at work. Thus, finding happiness at work should be every worker's goal. A happy workplace entails making sure that every employee has a voice and that they are safe from any sort of violence, both emotional and physical. Everyone deserves to feel safe in the workplace and be their authentic self. Thank you so much, Chamni, Sejal, and Rohan for joining us today for this session. Have a great day. Thank you.